17 million barrels per day. That's the staggering volume of oil that flows through the Strait of Hormuz on a daily basis. About one-fifth of all the oil traded worldwide, as reported by the U.S. Energy Information Administration. And at this very moment, the United States Navy has stationed 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers in those critical waters, tasked with carrying out mine clearance activities. Take a second to really absorb that. We're not talking about simple patrol boats or dedicated minesweepers here. No, these are destroyers, among the most powerful surface combatants in the entire U.S. fleet, serving as the backbone for this particular mission. I've followed naval movements in the Persian Gulf closely for quite some time now, and the way this operation is set up stands out as something unique in my experience. The decision on which vessels to deploy and the sequence involved reveals insights that go far beyond any official statements. This isn't merely about clearing potential explosives from the seabed. It's fundamentally about who holds sway over one of the planet's most vital waterways, those crucial 33 kilometers, and the direct impact on your everyday expenses when that control faces any challenge. A prolonged interruption in the Strait of Hormuz won't remain confined to the region. Its effects ripple outward, influencing oil prices, shipping expenses, overall inflation rates, and ultimately the monetary policy choices that affect everything from your home loan payments to the financing costs for your company. Over the last few days, I've delved deeply into the strategic thinking driving this positioning of forces. The insights I've uncovered extend well past the typical news summaries. If you're interested in grasping the real messages being sent and their potential implications for the coming months, I invite you to follow along closely. Most reports on this development miss the mark in a key way. They tend to skim the surface-level details, mentioning the mine clearance effort, the naval involvement, rising tensions in the area, and then stopping there, treating the tactical aspects as the entire tale. But that's far from sufficient. To get a complete understanding, it's essential to examine 3 important dimensions that usual media accounts often overlook entirely. The first involves the reasoning behind picking these particular naval assets. What message does choosing these ships send beyond just fulfilling the basic task at hand? Second, we have to consider the underlying economic framework of this vital passage, including which parties gain from keeping things stable, who stands to profit from any instability, and the ways these conflicting motivations are influencing choices in Washington, across Middle Eastern capitals, and within global energy trading circles. Third comes the lens of historical parallels, since this isn't the initial occasion when U.S. naval forces have been arranged in precisely this manner, in this very location, amid similar geopolitical strains. And on the previous occurrence, the results caught many observers completely off guard. In what follows, I'll offer you a thoughtful strategic perspective, not ready-made judgments, but a useful structure to help interpret the true dynamics playing out behind the formal diplomatic words and press briefings. After all, in the world of geopolitics, the most meaningful indicators are rarely the ones shouted from the rooftops. They're usually the subtle ones right there in front of us, waiting for those who look carefully to notice them. Before diving into interpretations, let's ground ourselves in the established facts. Public information from the U.S. Energy Information Administration indicates that roughly 20% of the world's traded petroleum passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Given today's consumption patterns, that equates to approximately 17 to 18 million barrels daily. Importantly, there is no backup pathway capable of handling such a massive throughput if the strait were to close. The existing pipelines that skirt around it, such as the one connecting Abqaiq to Yanbu in Saudi Arabia, simply lack the necessary capacity to make up for a complete shutdown. This underscores the immense, unchangeable economic significance of this narrow stretch of water. It's embedded deeply into the global energy system's foundation, shaping supply lines that touch nearly every corner of modern life. Turning to the specific vessels involved, the U.S. Navy has verified the deployment of the USS Michael Murphy and the USS Frank E. Peterson, Jr. both advanced Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers. These aren't auxiliary ships by any means. Each one weighs in at around 9,000 tons, features the sophisticated Aegis combat system, and boasts an arsenal including Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles, plus multi-layered defenses against aerial threats. Supporting them are Avenger-class mine countermeasures vessels, which are purpose-built for the delicate job of detecting and eliminating underwater mines. These ships come equipped with specialized non-magnetic hulls and advanced high-resolution sonar systems. The procedures they're using follow established protocols that have been thoroughly tested over time. This includes remotely operated vehicles, sophisticated underwater drones that pinpoint mines and destroy them using precisely shaped explosive charges. Additionally, MH-53E Sea Dragon helicopters drag specialized gear to sense or safely detonate mines from afar. Unmanned submersibles also survey the ocean floor with detailed sonar mapping. It's worth noting that every one of these approaches has known constraints and isn't guaranteed to work perfectly in busy, tense maritime environments filled with competing interests. This kind of activity isn't without precedent in the region's past. Back in 1987, America initiated Operation Earnest Will, which represented the biggest U.S. naval convoy effort since the Second World War. It involved protecting Kuwaiti tankers reflagged under American colors as they navigated these same waters amid the Iran-Iraq conflict. Then, in April 1988, the USS Samuel B. Roberts hit a mine, resulting in injuries to 10 crew members and bringing the frigate close to sinking. The U.S. counteraction, known as Operation Praying Mantis, turned into the most significant American naval battle on the surface since World War II. That chain of developments started with what seemed like a straightforward contained assignment. The verifiable details are straightforward enough. The ships are there, and past events provide clear examples. Yet those basics leave out the deeper questions that should be occupying the minds of policy experts today. Why opt for destroyers specifically? Why at this particular time? And why arrange the forces in this distinctive setup instead of relying solely on standard mine hunting units? The response to those inquiries requires digging one level further. It's the kind of issue that official updates simply don't address directly. Consider this. If the main goal is clearing mines, a precise, step-by-step underwater procedure, the Avenger-class ships are ideally suited as the primary workers. They are loaded with the necessary detection equipment, robotic tools, and crews specially prepared for these challenging conditions. By their very construction, they represent the optimal choice for executing that technical role. So it raises an important point. What purpose do these two Arleigh Burke destroyers serve by leading the effort? After all, these are warships designed for intense combat scenarios, capable of intercepting missiles and projecting power over wide areas. A destroyer is much more than just another boat on the water. Deploying one sends a clear message. By placing an Aegis-equipped guided missile destroyer in such a disputed passage, the Navy isn't only shielding the more vulnerable craft below. It's conveying a strong indication of readiness and strength. It's informing all parties watching, and rest assured, several nations are closely observing, that any attempt to heighten tensions will encounter a swift, multifaceted, and decisive counter. This isn't mere guesswork. It aligns with long-established principles in U.S. naval strategy regarding forward-deployed forces. The real intrigue arises when we examine the schedule. This move isn't occurring in isolation. During the spring of 2025, there have been occasional positive developments in communication lines between Washington and Tehran. News outlets like Reuters and the Associated Press have noted that back-channel talks concerning Iran's nuclear ambitions persist in some form. One possible reading, and it should be presented carefully as just one viewpoint, suggests that conducting a prominent naval mission in the Strait, while these diplomatic efforts are underway, fulfills two roles at once. Outwardly, it's a valid effort to secure the shipping lanes against mines, but underneath, it demonstrates firm determination, exactly when such strength could influence bargaining positions. This approach isn't unfamiliar to those who study these matters. Observers familiar with 4 decades of U.S. naval actions in the Gulf will spot the recurring theme. Using military gestures to support, rather than substitute for, ongoing negotiations. Of course, fairness demands we explore the contrasting viewpoint as well. Certain experts in the region and around the globe contend that introducing destroyers into such a delicate area, no matter the stated purpose, carries inherent dangers. The reasoning is logical. More powerful equipment raises the stakes and the sense of threat perceived by others, potentially increasing chances for errors or unintended clashes. In this view, the destroyers aren't helping to calm things down. Instead, they amount to an aggressive stance wrapped in the language of a routine procedure. Both of these readings make logical sense and are supported by knowledgeable individuals. This duality indicates that opting for destroyers over a purely specialized mine-clearing team wasn't decided purely on practical grounds. It represented a choice with political dimensions. And such high-stakes decisions, made in this strategically sensitive location with enormous financial implications, rarely stand alone. They tie into broader considerations, which become evident upon reviewing historical episodes where similar setups occurred in these waters. Before proceeding, it's crucial to do what too much analysis skips. Fairly present and strengthen the case from the other side. True examination must withstand scrutiny from the best counterpoints. Otherwise, it's just echoing preconceptions with nicer visuals. So let's clearly outline the unknowns and the solid perspectives opposing a heightened alarm view. To begin with, specialists at various research centers focused on Gulf affairs maintain that mine countermeasures in this area happen more frequently than recent stories suggest. The U.S. Fifth Fleet, based in Bahrain, regularly carries out drills and maintains a steady presence across these waters. According to this line of thinking, pairing destroyers with mine countermeasures, ships follows normal protective protocols for operations. It doesn't signify anything special, provoke anyone, or indicate growing conflict. Rather, it's seen as planned military routine that's been exaggerated by news outlets eager for dramatic stories. This perspective merits careful consideration. Additionally, academics and watchers from Asia and the Middle East who examine U.S. maritime activities here offer a different angle. They don't claim the operation itself is hostile, but point out that having substantial American warships in such a tight, intensely watched channel naturally elevates the odds of some kind of encounter, intentional or not. For them, the hazard stems not from bad intentions, but from the closeness of forces, potential for misunderstandings, and the shortened time frames for responses when several armed groups operate in a limited area at once. Historical records from the Gulf lend some support to this assessment. Finally, and this needs to be emphasized strongly, up to now, as this commentary is being prepared, Tehran has issued no direct public response to this specific naval activity. That silence is noteworthy. Any assumptions about Iran's plans, responses, or role in creating the situation calling for this mission are still speculative at best. They should be viewed as unanswered questions rather than confirmed realities based on the information currently at hand. Consequently, we're facing a situation of real strategic uncertainty. The effort might represent standard procedure, or it could carry coercive elements, or its dangers might arise largely from the physical layout and nearness of opposing forces instead of any planned strategy. Embracing this uncertainty feels uneasy, yet it's a more truthful approach than forcing it into a simplified story too soon. And it's exactly this kind of unclear, tense atmosphere that past events have shown to be particularly hazardous. I'd like to draw your attention back to the year 1987 for some relevant context. Not to claim that events will unfold identically, they seldom do, but because there are echoes that offer valuable lessons when examined thoughtfully. During the summer of 1987, the U.S. began Operation Earnest Will to tackle a pressing issue. Tankers carrying Kuwaiti oil were under attack in the Persian Gulf as the Iran-Iraq War neared its end. The U.S., countered by re-registering those vessels as American and escorting them with naval protection. Initially, the operation was presented as narrow in scope, focused on defense and strictly bounded. Then, roughly 9 months afterward, in April 1988, the USS Samuel B. Roberts, a guided missile frigate, encountered a mine in international waters. The blast came close to splitting the ship apart, wounded 10 sailors, and the crew's remarkable efforts were all that prevented it from going down. In response, the United States conducted Operation Praying Mantis just days later, resulting in the biggest surface naval confrontation for America since World War II. It hadn't been intended as a major escalation. It developed from an unexpected interaction with something on the sea bottom. I'm not predicting an exact repeat of that timeline here. That kind of assertion would go too far, and I won't venture it. Instead, what stands out from reviewing naval engagements in the Persian Gulf spanning 40 years is a noticeable recurring structure. Operations launched with modest, clearly outlined technical aims often grow in scope. This expansion frequently isn't due to intentional shifts in policy, but rather stems from the challenging setting that produces unexpected factors beyond any original blueprint. The confined space, the multitude of involved parties, and the high financial interests all compress the time available for thoughtful decisions. The experts who worry me the most during episodes like the current one aren't those forecasting disaster. They're the individuals who quit questioning potential pitfalls after convincing themselves that everything remains firmly within planned limits. Operation Earnest Will started with comparable assurance, yet the mine that damaged the Samuel B. Roberts paid no attention to the operational guidelines before exploding. With that in mind, here's a key question for us to consider moving ahead. Should an unexpected event take place in the Strait of Hormuz in our current time, which parties would feel the financial fallout initially? And just how rapidly would those effects make their way into your own life? To bring this home, because international strategy can often seem distant and theoretical, something affecting strangers in faraway spots, discussed in terms of barrels, percentage points, and sea distances, until suddenly it's very real, until it appears on your utility statement, at the checkout counter, or in your monthly debt obligations. Let's break down the pathways through which this could happen, one by one. The most straightforward impact is on oil market fluctuations. Recall June 2019, when 2 tankers suffered attacks close to the strait. Neither one was lost, and the actual effect on oil availability was small and brief. Nevertheless, prices for Brent crude jumped over 15% in just a few days, driven purely by worries about possible future problems in the passage rather than any real shortfall in supply. Financial markets react to risks right away. They don't require actual interruptions to adjust valuations. At today's starting price levels, a similar percentage increase would quickly feed into elevated expenses for fuel throughout the entire distribution network, affecting transport, production, farming, and delivery services. Every industry handling physical movement of items takes on part of that burden and then transfers it onward to consumers. That's the process by which a military activity in a waterway you've likely never seen can start influencing gas prices at your local station in a matter of weeks. A secondary pathway unfolds more gradually but affects wider areas, particularly related to food costs through supply chain strains. Beyond petroleum, the Gulf route handles fertilizers and other chemical components vital for farming, along with finished products shipped from manufacturing hubs in South and Southeast Asia. Even a moderate, temporary halt lasting a month or two can lead to shortages that require 3 to 4 months to correct fully. The resulting price adjustments don't hit instantly but accumulate, and then surge, most noticeably into grocery costs. And food inflation tends to be among the most noticeable and contentious types of price rises for people everywhere. The third pathway strikes particularly close to home for anyone with loans or operating a venture. Rising prices act like a hidden burden, quietly diminishing what your money can buy without any fanfare or warning. This In turn, influences central bankers who may have been heading toward lowering rates. Should both energy and food costs climb together from issues in Hormuz, the progress toward easing inflation that key banks have been guiding could face setbacks. Plans for rate reductions might be delayed, keeping credit more expensive. For smaller companies running with limited buffers, the kind that provide most jobs in many countries, this becomes very tangible, potentially separating the ability to cover salaries from falling short. Looking specifically at places like Vietnam and the rest of Southeast Asia, the vulnerability is built in. These nations rely heavily on imported processed fuels and materials for their energy-demanding industries. They are price takers rather than setters, bearing the full force of shifts. One aspect, seldom highlighted in discussions, is how nations with the fewest options to protect against sudden energy changes typically suffer the greatest harm and take the longest to bounce back. This isn't due to poor governance, but because worldwide resource markets aren't designed around their specific needs for stability. The initial disturbance in the Strait of Hormuz may not direct its outcomes, but those outcomes spread inevitably. Currently, the factors deciding their direction are being determined by choices aboard those two destroyers patrolling a short 33-kilometer stretch. These are choices where the people making them can't fully foresee or manage all the downstream results. It's this gap between the limited scope of one decision and the vast reach of its possible effects that elevates the importance of paying attention now. Not because of the ships themselves or the political displays, but due to that fundamental imbalance. Let's acknowledge our current position clearly. We have information on the deployed units, the physical setting, the critical economic role of the passage, and the ways past restricted missions in this zone have evolved when surprises arose. What remains unknown is the eventual outcome. I want to emphasize this unknown aspect accurately, since jumping to tidy endings is a frequent shortcoming in discussions of world affairs. The urge to package an ongoing, multifaceted scenario with a neat wrap-up is strong, but it ultimately misleads and fails to help the audience. Instead, here are the elements I'll be monitoring closely over the next weeks. One key factor is involvement from partner nations. The United Kingdom and France possess effective mine countermeasures capabilities and have joined the U.S. in similar Gulf efforts before. Should one or both commit forces officially, it would transform the mission's nature from primarily an American initiative to a cooperative international endeavor, carrying fresh diplomatic weight for all involved countries. Conversely, if they stay out, that choice also provides clues worth analyzing. Another element is progress along diplomatic avenues. Reports suggest indirect discussions between Washington and Tehran continue despite everything. How this naval activity influences those talks, whether speeding them up, slowing them, or leaving them unaffected, will reveal a lot about the actual assessments both sides are making away from public statements. The final factor defies easy prediction: that unforeseen encounter, the error in judgment, or the unscheduled event no one planned or desired. It's precisely that element which disrupted the controlled boundaries of Operation Earnest Will back in 1988. I'll continue following these aspects as events unfold and aim to deliver updated perspectives ahead of the mainstream reports. If the approach I've shared here has provided you with tools to better interpret events instead of passively accepting surface accounts, then you recognize the value in this deeper style of examination. The Strait of Hormuz is bound to see further developments. The real issue isn't if changes will occur, but whether we'll be equipped to comprehend their true significance when they do. And as someone dedicated to cutting through the noise on Global Truth Pulse, I'll keep bringing you that unfiltered lens so you can stay ahead of the curve in understanding these pivotal shifts.